And I remember when Amistad came out, it was Spielberg's first film. Well, it was the second film since Schindler's List, because that same year, I think, or the year before that, The Lost World came out. So I wanted to find out how did you, because you wrote the script, just kind of give me the genesis of the script first, how that came about. Was Spielberg sort of involved from the very beginning, or it was something that it caught his eye and kind of went from there? If you can just tell me that in the story way, that'd be fantastic.
Okay, let me see if I can come up with a short version here.
Okay.
I had just finished adapting The Mayor of Castro Street,
Okay.
Randy Schultz for Oliver Stone. And excuse me, let me have a quick sip of coffee here to clear my throat.
No problem.
And the script was well received, and my agents were very interested in me getting involved with, high-end projects. And I remember having lunch with one of my agents and saying that there were two projects I really wanted to do. One was Amistad, and there was a story I wanted to do about a gladiator. So they were really disappointed, because I remember after I won the Oscar for Gladiator, my agent called me and said, "Remember, I told you no one would ever make it." So they were disappointed, but they wanted me to jump into these big dollar projects, action movies, and so forth. So I had been talking with Quincy Jones about Amistad. In fact, his company pitched it to me, along with a bunch of vinyl ideas, record ideas.
Right.
None of which attracted me. So I did a bunch of research on Amistad and went into Quincy, and he didn't like it. He didn't like the idea. He didn't like the idea. So I went out on my own, and actually another producer. We're trying to put it together, and it was difficult, but in the middle of cutting to the chase, in the middle of trying to put it together, DreamWorks had me in to talk about projects, and they pitched Amistad to me. I said, guys, I've been wanting to do this, so let's definitely talk about it. And about a week later, it was on Valentine's Day. Stephen was in town. He came from the Hamptons or something, and we talked about it. And there were a lot of issues that Stephen could see making this project difficult. And I said, well, I've been thinking about it for over a year now. And I think that the most important aspect is that Cinqué participate in his defense. This can't be white guy saves black guy.
Yeah, yeah.
It defeats the entire purpose of the project, right?
Which is what I loved about the film at the most. There was just, even at that time, it was done really, really well, right? So.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty good. So I thought Stephen did an amazing job, and anyway, so that's how it started.
And your sort of involvement, being, you wrote a script. Was it, normally a script goes through like a lot of, just like anything else, lots of drafts. Sometimes different writers come on board for availability reasons and whatnot. But you were sort of involved from the get-go, and then the first draft that you gave to Spielberg, and he knows obviously his stuff. That's why he's Spielberg, right? And what was his sort of like? Did he want something different, or he suggested something to you? Maybe we should do this, or just kind of talking about that a little bit.
Well, I think also, don't forget, I believe Stephen, if I'm not mistaken, had recently done Private Ryan.
No, that was after.
Okay, then
he had done the film before that. Was his last major film was Schindler's List, and right. And I think that summer, if I'm not mistaken, just checking, Amistad was released when it was released in 1997. So that summer he was finishing The Lost World, Jurassic Park 2. Okay. It came out in theaters.
Right, he was multitasking, shall we say?
Yeah.
And starting a new company, doing films for his company. And so, we talked a lot about Amistad. Now, Debbie Allen was producer.
Yep.
The fun part was we'd take meetings with Stephen, and then afterwards, Debbie and I'd sit down and we talk about the civil rights era
Mhm.
and try to find an organic way to make it alive,
Yeah.
not hitting it over the head with a hammer. There was a production rewrite done on it. They basically went back to my script. There were changes. Obviously, there's always changes, but
Yeah.
they went back to my script. And the main driving reason was that, again, it goes back to the idea that Sing-K has to be in charge of his own destiny. He cannot just be, lugged around by a bunch of well-meaning white guys.
Right. Right.
And also, the other thing that was slightly more subtle was, though Morgan Freeman was an abolitionist, and Sing-K was a free man. And I saw that as them being different in that respect.
Right.
There's no way that an abolitionist, no matter how well-meaning, can understand what it completely, especially if an abolitionist had been at one time a slave. There's no way they could understand who Sing-K really was. And the weird part I thought that sort of worked was that John Quincy Adams, having come out of, the revolution, and that he could, obviously his ancestor, but he could understand as best as any non-slave or, not black free person could, what that meant. And the thing that was important was that he understood that if they won, it might cause a civil war.
Right.
So Quincy Adams had to be able to stand up to that terror, to the idea that winning this case for this free black man may cause America to be torn in half. And, ultimately his decision was, then let it be. If that's the case, let it be so. So between the two of them, I think that there was a partnership in putting together Sing-K's defense. And I love the idea that they're so different and yet both essentially radicalized for different reasons. Anyway, blah, blah, blah.
No, that's a good answer. And I thought that the film, like I said earlier, with what's been happening in the world in the last year, I mean, even though, to my memory, the first maybe like a self-aware thing that I saw was the Rodney King riots, when I was like 13, 14 in 1991. And I think at that time it was probably at a conscious level, I realized the whole, the black versus white race, like the racism element.
Right.
And it kind of it went away, but just like in music, kind of kept coming back. But I think one of the things that I loved about Amistad was it, like you said, is it just did not deal with the white man saving a black guy. And even though it was President John Quincy Adams and and all that. And for me, the most pivotal moment in the film, which was aside from the John Williams music, was when that baby is sort of risen, from the shackles of the ship, and that sort of humanizes the whole thing. Even if it was made during the civil rights movement or in the 1800s, so which was fantastic. Going on to my next question, when the production began, and I've read at different places with Stephen, he sometimes has writers sort of there on the set during the production or part of the production. Were you involved in that during the production, or were you there physically at most of the time, if at all?
No, not most of the time. I was there a couple of times. That was about it. We weren't out of touch,
Right.
but because I was talking with Debbie Allen, and she's always talking to Stephen.
Right.
But no.
So was there ever like sort of like okay, if Stephen emailed you, not emailed your phone, could email your phone, you called you, that this is something we're doing. What do you think we should do this? Like, was there a moment and an example that you can remember where?
Well, there was a moment when Debbie Allen called me one night, and she was having some problems with the direction that the script was taking. Now, this is before they started shooting, so this is the time to put up or shut up, right?
Right.
Um, we had a discussion, and again, I kept saying, look, in my opinion, as long as we stay on the direct path for Cinqué being in charge of a man in charge of his own destiny, no matter how that's translated within the script, then we're okay. I mean, no matter how that's done, it doesn't have to be
Yeah.
done the way I did it, as long as it's got to
Right.
be done. And so that was really about it. And I heard from her, I hear from her often during the shoot, and that was about it. I mean, for me, the most fantastic thing about the movie was when we showed it in Washington D.C. to the Clintons, and
Okay.
that was that was pretty amazing. Primarily because you had these two sort of genres of human beings, the Hollywood genre people, and then the heavy hitter political genre people,
Yeah.
sitting side by side in the audience. But there are also some very well-to-do African-American people who are watching this. And when we had the scene with the slaves being thrown off the boat with chains around their legs, they just broke into tears. And that's when I realized it works.
Yeah.
It says what it set out to say. It says.
That's great. I'll come to that White House part of screening in a bit, but going back, you said you were there on the set a couple of times, once or twice, or was there, did you ever see the rushes, or if not, then is there a memory that sort of sticks out? What scene was being filmed when you were there, and how that hit you?
When they were shooting a scene, it was a scene where Morgan Freeman goes on to the Amistad to we see the chains, we see
Hmm.
living, and I think what's important about that, again going back to what I said before about him, was this is a well-meaning abolitionist coming face to face with the reality of slavery in the most primal form it could take. Now, on the plantations, things were horrible, just horrible. But
Yeah.
we weren't filming that. But that moment to me was it was. I just remember that moment, sticks in my head because of what it was written for.
Got it. And was there, I mean, since I genuinely think, and correct me if I'm wrong, maybe I was not aware of it at the time. I don't think there were that many movies, if any at all, about slavery before Amistad. Like, after that we had tons, like 12 years of, slave, tons of them came out over time. Was there anything at the time before that, or was it the first one of its kind?
I don't recall. I mean, when Quincy Adams people, Quincy Jones people brought up the idea of doing Amistad, I was familiar with Amistad, and I went, oh yeah, let's do that. I mean, I don't want to do movies about crooked music recorders. I mean, I just don't have bandwidth for that silliness. But it jumped out of my memory.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, I'm doing a project right now on Lafayette,
Oh,
and
okay.
Lafayette. Lafayette worked very closely with several blacks, and but the thing that's one of the things that I want to do in this movie that is actually a series that I'm writing is I
Right.
want to revisit the black identity during the American Revolution, because it's always appeared to me that the South rewrote the reality of the African American presence in America. And into a couple of guys and whatever. But a German mercenary, I just found these texts. A German mercenary who was fighting with the French was at Yorktown when Washington took the
Right.
surrender of Cornwallis, right? And he said 25% of Washington's army was black.
Mm.
That's very different from all these lame ass paintings you see of these buffed white guys in perfect uniforms fighting to save America. 25% of those people should.
That's a big number. That's a big. I mean, there was a movie made about that too, with Morgan Freeman. And I think it was Denzel's first movie too, Glory.
Glory.
Yeah, yeah. It was 1989, I think, if I'm not mistaken. But it wasn't specifically about what you're saying, but it had that, element of the African American slash, black people in the army.
The difference is that Washington didn't have black regiments.
Yeah.
They were just integrated.
Yeah.
Period. It wasn't like, I mean, the British had a black regiment, blah, blah, blah. The Civil War, they were, segregated black regiments. In the American Revolution, they were just guys and girls on the line fighting, period. And that's what I love about it. And I remember when Lafayette came back to America, after all the founding fathers had died, he's an old man, and America embraced him. He saw the African American that he used to work with Washington in the crowd, and went down to him and embraced him. And the black guy introduced his son as Lafayette.
Oh, okay. That's pretty cool.
I think that the story from Cinque, the story of blacks in America, we haven't told the story yet.
Yeah,
that's what I guess I'm trying to say.
I agree, and I'm kind of going all over the place. And if you don't mind me asking you, is that, as storytellers, we all are attracted to story that's somehow at a conscious level or subconscious level attached to our past or our present. Like, just something that kind of comes out. Like I'm a filmmaker myself, and there's something that sort of sparks and connects with you that you don't even know what it is. With Amistad and the story of, even though Quincy Jones people approached you and everything, was there anything that you sort of, before you even wrote Amistad, that sort of you had seen in your real life, in your life that sort of maybe have sparked that at all, that you're aware of?
I mean, look, I'm a product of the '60s.
Civil rights, right?
Civil rights. I mean, nothing. I'm going through my vacant mind right now, trying to find that specific thing. But the thing, I grew up in Vermont.
Okay.
The thing odd about Vermont was, of course, one of the main underground railway conduits. But one thing about Vermont was, it seems weird. Like when I grew up, there were no black kids in my high school, and the interest in, like, people would say, "Oh, Vermont, it's this white state." But the thing that was interesting about that is I also wasn't fed prejudice. I mean, nobody had anything to say.
Yeah.
College and these black guys, we just got along great. I mean, in fact, one of them came to me and said, "Franzoni, you need to have somebody to hate." I said, "Well, let's find someone for you to hate." But it was like, they were just my friends. Yeah. And then I began seeing how some of them were being treated and so forth. So that's all I can probably reference.
No, that makes sense. That's all good. What was the first time you saw Amistad in its completion, or was it a rough cut? And if you can talk about that, what was your reaction from a screenwriting front? It's a tough thing to take someone's words and put it on the screen, and how you sort of reacted to that, if you can share that story, whether it was at White House or somewhere else.
I thought it was great. I think I saw a rough cut, and then I saw the finished cut. I just, immediately embraced it. I thought it was fantastic.
But was there something that stood out for you from a standpoint of how you may have, when you're writing, you're visualizing something a certain way?
Beginning.
So it was pinpoint to the way you sort of envisioned it, or was there a certain moment?
In the beginning, I had written this thing balls out.
Yeah.
Cinque with a nail, and Steven shot it balls out. And I just, from that moment on, I was there. It was, he did not back away from dealing with that reality.
And that's one of the things I loved about three of his films, and I always consider them as sort of a trilogy. Schindler's List dealing with the Holocaust, Amistad dealing with the slavery issue, and Munich dealing with the Israeli and Palestine conflict. And I in all of those three films, even in the one that you wrote, there's even the antagonist is sort of shown in somewhat of a, they have some sort of a character or some sort of a mission, whether it's right or wrong. And he really balances it out really, really well. In Amistad, I think the to me personally, the antagonist was the way the blacks were being treated. There was not one specific antagonist, but it was like the history, the American politics and whatnot. Did you sort of come on when you wrote that? Was that what was your objective? Not to have
Points of view at the time.
right.
I guess it was Hobbes and somebody else. One point of view that the South embraced was that mankind was just plain evil, and the natural state of mankind is barbarism, and if left alone, they'd eat each other. Now, this is from a philosopher.
Right.
Obviously, for the abolitionist, there was an entirely different point of view. But this, I remember meeting afterwards, the Writers Guild set up a meeting with a few members of Congress who wanted to meet me and talk about the movie. And this came up. And because, these guys in Congress, they're way smarter than they come off. Right? Anyway, so, but that had always fascinated me, was that there was this, huge philosophical divide between what would become the North in the Civil War and the South in the Civil War. And so for anyone who said to me, by the way, I'm a direct descendant of General Slocum.
Okay.
The Slocum family.
Okay.
He, not only was he, very helpful at Gettysburg, but he was put in charge of Sherman's left wing when they did the March to the Sea. And he was in the war because he hated slavery. None of this states' rights crap. He didn't want to hear about it. He hated slavery. And he was one of the few generals who actually took in blacks who he liberated, rather than just saying, okay, take off. He took them in, fed them, kept them with the army, and took care of them. So I knew that there was this sort of a deeper way of looking at the Civil War than we have sort of been fed.
Right.
Anyway, so that's why we brought up the whole thing with Hobbes versus
Yeah.
Rousseau, I guess. Anyway, was that, look, here's the situation. There are people who claim to believe in this completely, vastly terrible vision of mankind. And the only way that you can justify slavery is to have a terrible, vastly horrible vision of mankind.
Yeah. No. Well said. Pinpoint. And last question about Amistad, unless you want to sort of add something else, is I always have a hard time pronouncing his name. Djimon Hounsou.
Yeah, Simon.
Yeah. Djimon Hounsou. It was his first film.
Yeah.
Right. And then
no pressure.
Yeah, no pressure. But even I'm sure he knew English in his own life, but as a character, he didn't play. He didn't speak English at all, which I think was fantastic because it made him. It sort of spoke to what you were saying, the white saving black. Like, he doesn't have to speak English to make people understand. Like, even if they had no subtitles, you would understand what he's saying because his performance and his delivery was phenomenal.
Yeah.
And in terms of the casting, and I know as a writer you don't really have much say in that, but from what you saw, it was point on, like how you envisioned it.
Oh, it was perfect. I mean, look, Jacques and I still see each other, and obviously sorry, that's my dog.
That's okay.
Let me close my door.
No, no problem.
He's on his way out. He obviously he did Gladiator too, but we just I don't know. He was perfect. He was perfect. When he said "give me free," that's it. That's as articulate as you need to be.
Yeah.
He was great. Stephen chose well as usual.
Yeah, no, he was amazing, and I mean the whole movie, like I said, John Williams' score is just, the theme, it sticks out like a knife in the chest. Moving on to Gladiator, Gladiator was, from what I've seen in terms of the credits, David, is that it was the writers involved was yourself and John Logan. But if you can sort of give me the genesis, were you the person who sort of started it, or just the same thing, like just the genesis of how Gladiator came about as a film, as a screenplay?
Genesis?
Yes.
Okay. You asked for it. When I was 25 years old, I drove a motorcycle from West Berlin to Australia.
Okay.
And when I was in, so as I'm leaving Europe, now I spent a lot of time in free Europe, and I
Yeah.
went to communist countries, and almost everywhere I went, there were coliseums. And even as you went east, Turkey, and so there were still coliseums.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, this must, I suddenly realized this was a huge franchise. This wasn't like the Coliseum in Rome. This was like out there.
Yeah.
When I got to Baghdad, I was camping on one of the rivers. I can't remember which one. And I traded a book, which I wish I still have, on the Irish Revolution, which I have not been able to find again. This is brilliant. With an Australian girl who had a book called Those About to Die by Daniel P. Mannix, which was this crazy, tawdry, wild, this sort of book about the Colosseum. Well, what was fantastic about it was it hardwired in my brain the absolute similarities between who we are and who we were.
Okay.
Sort of talking about, oh, the Romans, the Greeks did this. It was like, oh, we did this.
Yeah.
So I literally vowed at that time that if I ever got to be a screenwriter, I'd try to get a movie made about that idea. I mean, I came up with the idea for Gladiator then, right? And so when I was writing Amistad, I was in Rome. I had a great apartment in Trastevere that had a library, fortunately in English. And so I began reading through the Augustan histories and gathering the information I needed to pitch it to Stephen.
Great. No, that's something that I never knew. That's great.
I'm sorry you know it now.
No, it's good. It's interesting, right? Like I said earlier, like stories sort of come to you from the most strangest places, and sometimes you don't even know where they come from, and you never find out, but they do. It just kind of connects with you somehow.
Right.
And you wrote Gladiator, and was it around the same time when Amistad was coming out? Because Gladiator came out in 2000, I think, and Amistad came out in 1998, which was like a year and a half apart. Um, that you took the script to DreamWorks, or and how did that sort of start, from getting Ridley Scott involved, and
So Stephen knew I wanted to pitch him something, and he called over to my agency and said that we had. There were 2 days during the week we could get together and have a meeting. I told my agents, don't tell them what it's about.
Right.
I want to start this way. Of course, they told them what it was about. So, all good agents. So I met with Stephen, and I first talked with Doug Wick about it, the producer.
Okay.
And so in the end, I brought Doug Wick over with me. But I pitched it to Stephen. I didn't pitch it to Stephen. I go into the office.
Right.
And Stephen goes, I hear you want to do a movie about a gladiator. I said, yeah. He said,
right.
You mean in ancient Rome? I said, yeah. He says, you mean in the Colosseum? I said, yeah. He said, okay. So I said, yeah, 3 times. That was my pitch. And that was it.
That's fantastic. And then how did Ridley become involved? Was it more of like a Spielberg's pick, or it was something that was pitched?
I'm sorry. How did Ridley get involved in all?
Yeah, like was it more of like Stephen kind of went, and Stephen has a knack of picking people for everything. Like, was it his choice or?
No, this was all, I got the first draft done. We met at Stephen's house. He immediately sent Branko Lucevic out to start scouting locations. And I remember we met with Russell, and then we met with Ridley, and we're on our way. Period.
So it was Steven Spielberg's first sort of preference to have Ridley Scott get involved in this.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And Russell Crowe. Go ahead, please.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say Russell Crowe. I think just before that film came out, he was in the Inside Man. No, the Insider. The Inside
was the one that we sort of hired him from. He was doing the Insider.
Yeah.
With Michael Mann, but I think that was still shooting.
Yeah, which was an incredible film as well. But one of the things that I'll tell you about Gladiator, it had such a huge fan base. I don't know if you knew this, but at the time when I had my website at the at the highest level in terms of traffic and everything. It was so popular that I had to open up a dedicated message board for Gladiator. And I'm not kidding with you. If I showed you the screenshots, because you can go to the Internet Archive and look it up. These were like majority. I would imagine the demographic was based on my interaction with, women 40 plus, and Russell Crowe fans. And there was like 60, 70,000 posts in just a span of like 3 months. And this is before social media. So Gladiator, the story of Gladiator is so simple. A man taking revenge for the loss of his family, and that's pretty much the layer of it, and that's what sort of spoke to people, I think. But in the fashion that it was done, in Ridley Scott's typical fashion, and the performances, and you being involved as a producer, how involved were you in the film? Were you on location? Were you, can you sort of speak
Yeah.
about?
Okay. So yes, uh, there was a problem. We were in the middle of a rewrite that was problematic, but they were still going to shoot the film.
Yeah, yeah.
Didn't seem to bother anybody. So Ridley invited me, just come on, come aboard. So I was with them in Surrey. We shot they shot the scenes with the barbarians in Surrey.
Okay. The opening scenes.
Right. And
Yeah.
then we went to Morocco for the provincial arena and all that. And so I showed up, and basically I started, putting the script back more or less the way it was before we went through the rewrite. And now, okay, so the tricky thing here was that I was being paid to do a rewrite, even though another writer, John Logan, was working on the script. And John was a great guy. We were in contact. And so I finished my rewrite, but there was nobody to read it.
Okay.
They forgot about it. So that was the script that basically I was reintroducing into this mix, was the polish, or the rewrite, we're going to call it, my first draft. Now, the fun part of this insane process was that really shooting the thing in, I think, pretty much in sequence, because nuts, it's nuts. And I remember there's times when Russell and I are sitting on the ground and we're drawing pictures in the sand. And he's saying, "Oh, we want this, we want this, we want this." And okay. So you got that? And yeah. And they go back and break the sand. It was a really fantastic organic process. So at 3 in the morning, I hand Ridley the pages. He'd go off and shoot. Then we'd meet for dinner with cigars afterwards. I go back and, from the notes I took at dinner, blah, blah, blah. 3 o'clock in the morning, hand him pages. It was my family was on the shoot too. So it was great. It was like fantastic.
That's actually interesting that you mentioned it was shot in, basically in the order that it was written. Do you think, as a writer, I mean, I know that's not true all the time, it can't be, but one of the reasons, aside from everybody's performances, direction, music, everything, and the writing as well, is that because when you're filming everything in sequence of the script, what is going, how you can sort of fill in the gaps. And do you think that's one of the reasons it may have worked, aside from all the other reasons?
Like I'm trying to remember how exactly in sequence it was shot, but I mean, yeah. But then we went to Malta, where we were going to shoot the
Coliseum stuff. Right?
Coliseum. Yeah. I mean, I'm guessing.
That's okay.
Guessing it was good for the actors' heads.
Yeah, because you're in character and the progression of the story and how it's gonna. Yeah.
It's not like you wake up in the morning and you're dead, and the next morning you're alive.
Yeah. Okay, no, that's actually something new. I never knew that. And being on the set all the time, David, like, if you can maybe share 3 things with me, and I can repeat them one after the other once you're done with one, is maybe something that went wrong on the set, and how it was sort of brought back, how you kind of recovered from that, and maybe like a funny story involving yourself or Ridley or any Russell or Joaquin or anybody else, anything that sort of comes to memory.
Well, sure. So I arrive on the set, and Ridley and Russell and I sit down, and I guess they've been having some discussions about the script, which anyway. So Russell has this idea. Why don't we? Well, it's a democracy, so we'll vote on what we're doing next. And I said, this is great. So I either get to vote against the director or against the lead actor. I said, why don't we just take a look at the script? I mean, that it was done with a certain amount of humor. It wasn't like, people were dead serious. But there was always a tension because Russell was convinced that this was going to destroy his career. This terrible.
Really?
Oh, yeah. And but what's great about Russell, to give him huge credit, this is why I was so happy when he won the Oscar, is that he put all that angst into his character. I mean, he used it. He did his job. He was a pro. So I remember Ridley and I were in a car. We were driving up. Russell, we were all staying at the Berber Palace Hotel in Ouarzazate, and Russell had a mansion somewhere in the desert. And there were all these mansions were owned by military personalities, right? Mm-hmm. And they usually weren't there, so they just rented them out. So we're on our way there. We're intercepted by this Jeep, and it's the son of some general, and he was just beside himself. Anyway, the famous quote was that he wanted Russell removed from the area because he had, quote, violated every tenet of the Quran.
Really?
Yeah. Which someone said about me.
That's funny.
And then we had one night where we went out to have dinner with Russell, and it's way out there. It's near the Algerian border. So it's something ridiculous. And Russell and Ridley got into an argument, and Russell threw us out. Now, we didn't have a car, and our cell phones did not work. So we helped ourselves to the rec room of one of the general's abandoned mansions and played. Ridley's assistant was there too. The three of us played ping pong and pool all night until we were rescued by his assistant.
Oh, wow.
The fun thing was, I remember we were shooting the provincial arena, and Ridley taps me on the shoulder and points to a monitor. He says, "Check this out." And I look there, and there's Oliver Reed standing up there cheering, and all. He's got a cigarette in his mouth. Ridley's a totally, obviously, a complete pro. So he saw that it's funny rather than, oh my God, we have to reshoot that moment.
Yeah, one of the things I've seen Ridley's interviews and behind the scenes stuff on a lot of different films, and that he comes across as a type of filmmaker who just kind of goes with the flow. Like, he's not
going to get bent out of by Oliver Reed smoking a cigarette.
Yeah. I mean, had it been, of course, Stanley Kubrick, the late Stanley Kubrick, I mean, it would have been a different story. But, speaking of Oliver Reed, how far was in production that he passed away? And I know there was some digital stuff that had to be done. And how did that create the mood on the production?
Well, it was very close to the end. I mean, in Malta, I was no longer on the set.
Okay.
I'd spent a certain amount of time in Malta, but I'd come home by that point. I believe, yeah. Anyway, everybody was bummed out because he was a great guy. He just had a great mood. Before the night they were going to shoot some of the first Gladiator sequences, he had a party for all the Gladiators, and he was just into it. And he'd almost convinced me to move from Malibu to the outbacks of Ireland and with a couple of hunting dogs. I mean, that's how persuasive he is, right?
Yeah, he certainly has a character, even presence on screen. Even as a human being, certainly.
Well, they shot that one. They did that one digital thing, but here was the big issue was sort of like, is Russell going to live because he's the hero? See, it isn't just that this was a revenge film.
Yes.
Russell was set out to get revenge. Russell was just trying to get home.
Be with his family.
Right. And the only way at the end that he could get there was to sacrifice himself. So
yeah, go on.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to ask you, was that never written in the original script, or was it kind of like an iffy thing till the end of the production?
No. It was absolutely. I mean, I was of the opinion that Russell should die always,
Okay, okay.
and the events sort of, and I think Ridley, felt that way too, obviously because he killed him. So, but I think that part of it was the way the rewrite had it. I believe Oliver Reed was going to survive as well. So I think when he died, I mean, I don't know. Look, it just became what it became. But the real issue of the script was, this isn't a revenge film. This isn't a movie about a man who wants to get home. It's like Maximus is, one of those guys who helped keep the Roman Empire alive. He's a big general and liking all these people. He's, a friend of Marcus Aurelius. But then when he's offered the job of being the emperor, he declines. And so he's now condemned to live the underbelly of that same empire that he's helped keep in place. So it's like, there's he sort of deserves it in a way. And that, the hero goes into the underworld and he emerges a changed person and ready to make the great sacrifice. And he does.
Yeah, no, and I think one of the reasons is the fact that his character dies at the end. The film became very successful. I genuinely believe that, because he sacrificed himself. And speaking of characters, for me, the antagonist Commodus, played by Joaquin Phoenix, was an incredibly well written character. And on top of that, Joaquin just did such a phenomenal job. And I don't know if you've seen the new movie of his, which Joker by Todd Phillips.
Oh, sure, of course, yeah.
Yeah, and I which was an amazing film. It wasn't even a superhero film, and I can't stand superhero films. And I saw a lot of similarities in his character. Not that in any way it was trying to be a ripoff, but that broken character that he was in Gladiator, in Commodus, in Joker as well. And for you, besides Russell Crowe, being the protagonist, how did Joaquin, was it satisfying for you, for Joaquin, to sort of bring that character to life the way he did?
The cast of Gladiator was one of the best casts of all time. David Hemmings. He's like, you have all my heroes from the '60s, right?
Right.
Oliver. You had, what's his name? The guy,
Lawrence
Jacoby. The guy who was in I, Claudius, who played Claudius. It's like it had, and what's his name? Richard Harris. It had
Richard Harris, right?
Vast landscape of deadly serious actors. And so it obviously elevated it just because of that. So yeah, Joaquin. Well, the thing is, when they sent us Joaquin's
audition
tape, which I still have, we thought, you got to be kidding me, Joaquin Phoenix. And we watched the tape and went, unbelievable. He's Commodus, no question.
That's awesome. It would. Is that audition tape anywhere on the web?
No, I don't. Not that I know of. I didn't put it on the web. So.
Oh, okay, great. No, that's good. And my favorite scene of Commodus is when he sort of, I think it was in the middle of the film, when he stands in the same room with Connie Nielsen's character Lucilla, and how he is trying to be a strong, king, but his voice is shaking so much because he's scared inside. And I think that's what people, in terms of antagonists, that's what people sort of like you don't have like a villain that has no fear or anything. And he had everything. He had anger, he had fear, he had hate, he had jealousy, he had every single, characteristic that you can imagine, which was really well written, I thought. So I just wanted to give you kudos on that.
Well, it's not, I'm not just me. Look, John Logan came
John as well, sorry.
John as well. And I think that, but the thing about Joaquin was that he could just bring all those colors
Yeah.
to the camera. I mean, it's one thing to write them. It's the other thing to do them.
Of course.
He was amazing. So.
And he was, because I kind of felt sorry for his character, even though after all that he did, the way he delivered himself is that you actually felt for this guy, regardless of all the crazy things that he was doing, which is great. And you know, kind of moving on to the film completion of the film. When it came out, I remember it was in May of 2000, I think. And when was the time that you saw the first cut or the final cut, and how did you sort of take that in? I don't think there were any reshoots, right? There were no any pickup
I
shots or
don't
anything.
remember any pickups or anything. I mean, quite a bit earlier, I saw the rough cut. Okay, so I remember it well. We're at DreamWorks, and you know, sort of everybody who's involved with like doing the mechanical work on the film is there, and I'm watching it, and of course it's rough, and it's got incorrect music, and it's got it's a very, very, very rough cut.
Yeah.
And so we have this meeting afterwards to talk about it, and I'm just laughing and about what we need to fix. And I said, look, you guys can release this now with like the Bee Gees doing the music in the background, and it'd still be a hit. I mean, I just knew this is a deal, done deal. This is a hit. And one of the things that really got my attention was they on the internet, they were the fanboys were posting the theaters and the times when the trailer for Gladiator was going to be shown.
I remember that.
So you can pay to see a movie that you don't want to see just to see the trailer for Gladiator.
I was one of those people. So no, I specifically remember that for sure. No, it and even with the music, Hans Zimmer's score. Oh, I still listen to it. I still listen to it to this day when I'm on a run or anything else. It's just amazing, especially the Now We're Free track.
Yeah.
Beautiful, the way it sort of wraps up. And since we're on the music topic, were you in any sort of involvement with Hans Zimmer or the music process at all, or was it mostly Ridley?
No, it was Ridley. This is Ridley's realm. I mean, and probably Steven too, but
yeah. Okay, great. And sort of going back to Gladiator, and I've read on news reports, and I think on IMDb. I don't know what's the truth to it, so you tell me. Is there a Gladiator 2 happening?
I don't know. I mean, I'm a producer on it, but I have no idea what's really going on. I mean, they have to get the script right, and I'm sure that the script they've got right now is very good. I mean, but that's all that. I mean, I don't know.
But you're not involved as a writer on the second one.
No, not at all. I mean, I think. I mean, the issue becomes, how do you do it? I mean.
Yeah, it is a tough thing to pull off with the way that ended, right? It's like, what do you?
Well, okay. So initially we started talking about, like sort of within a couple of months after Gladiator was released, about a sequel.
Right.
Problem was that if we did a prequel, which meant the good news about a prequel was that Russell would still be alive.
Yeah, yeah.
The bad news was he never went to Rome.
There was no Gladiator.
There's no Gladiator. So it's like.
Yeah. No, it's okay. So that's good. Were you being at DreamWorks for production, for Amistad and Gladiator? Did you sort of see the studio? This is more of like a studio question than the films that you worked on. Did you sort of see the studio kind of come to life as you were working on Amistad and visiting there, and back and forth, or working with Steven? Was that just sort of like a side thing? I mean, you don't have to answer. It's fine. I'm just kind of curious.
There was a very special, and all I can tell you is there a very special vibe about going over there
Yeah.
and working with Steven, and there was a very special vibe that couldn't be duplicated anywhere else. Steven, Steven's sure of what he's doing. Look, we hand the script in and he starts scouting locations. How often does that happen, right? This is, okay, good. You got the script and let's make this damn thing. And so that was, a lot of good memories.
Yeah, and especially nowadays. I mean, the way the film industry is sort of shifting now. Unless it's like a superhero franchise, most likely the film is not going to go to the theaters. And now with coronaviruses, that's going to make it becoming, more of a trend too.
Yeah, we'll see. I have no idea. We'll see what happens, and we'll see.
So you wrote King Arthur, which I really like too, and since then you've had, if I'm not mistaken, you really haven't written anything. Was that more of a personal?
Well, I haven't written anything. It's there was
or written to get made. I know how everybody writes scripts where it never gets anywhere. Right?
I mean, look, I'm in one respect, I'm my own worst enemy. I like to take on difficult projects. And I'm working on a show right now with Robert Rodriguez and Renee Echevarria on the Aztec.
Okay.
And so they brought this project to me, the producers, and it was like intercutting between Spain and Mesoamerica, Tenochtitlan. And I'd been offered a couple of those conquistador movies in the past, and I never wanted to do them. But this time I figured out why I didn't want to do them, because I fucking hate the Spanish. I mean, I hate the conquistadors. I mean, I don't want to do a movie about these pigs, but I did want to do a movie about the Aztec. So that's what we're doing. We're going back away from the conquest and recreating the world of Tenochtitlan.
And that's going to be a series, you said?
We're conceiving it as a series. We had it originally set up at Hulu, and this was less to do with me than we're partners with A&E, and A&E pulled it from them. I think it was the right decision. I didn't understand what their notes meant, but anyway, I don't want to go there. But
yeah, that's fine. No, I wasn't trying to stir any controversy. I was just
all right. I mean, it's a great project, and Robert wants to build a great the Mayor pyramid on his set down in Austin, Texas.
Oh, okay.
Which would be awesome, right? That's I was working on a project with Mike Medavoy about the Austenberg list, and which I still want to do, but there were issues with that are hard to overcome. These projects, now there is a project I'm doing that my son brought to me, and where we have 3 interested parties right now. And so we're negotiating, trying to put this deal together. I can't tell you what it is because it's
fine.
It's fantastic. It's a fantastic project, and but it's got to be these. Look, here's the thing. When you're working with Steven, stuff gets done right.
Yeah. That's
hard to duplicate elsewhere.
Well, Steven is a filmmaker / businessman, right? Like, with everybody else, you go to the studio, they just don't see the art. They see numbers, right? That's all they see, which is good and important, but still.
Well, yes. On the other hand, one must recall that while we were making Gladiator,
people
were laughing at us because they thought, "Oh, Steven's finally lost it. He's doing a sword and sandal movie." And there's no Italians in it, but I mean, the arrogance of the know-it-alls sometimes is, staggering.
Is the greatest motivator too, because I mean, look what happened after Gladiator, Troy, Games of Thrones, King Arthur, and bunch of other movies came. I think that sort of started a whole trend. Clash of Titans, they remade it, and if it wasn't for Gladiator, it wouldn't have happened, because I think, to my knowledge, the last movie about the Romans was, way long ago, like in the 60s or the 50s, I think they made.
They call them sword and sandal movies. They were Demetrius and the Gladiators, and, just, Hercules and the Mole Man or something. I mean, these movies were like, they were a joke. But that's why my pitch to Steven was me saying yes 3 times, because he already knew he wanted to do it. He knew it was time. He had Steven's, perfect instinct, his antenna. He knew it was time for a film like this, considering what we could do with effects, blah, 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 get people in there who could really act. And because, look, the story of the Gladiators is, it's pretty profound.
It is definitely. Just a couple of parting thoughts, David. Your advice, and I know this is probably like the most cliche question. Your advice to like upcoming screenwriters, especially nowadays, where, for me at least, I feel writing is kind of going away, but kind of coming back at the same time. I don't know if that makes sense.
My son and I talk about it all the time. I mean, when I first came out here, I was in my 30s, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I got back from my motorcycle trip and I just came here. When I was in India riding my bike, I decided, I'm going to be a screenwriter. So I came out here. Now, my background's Fellini, Antonioni, that kind of stuff, right? Truffaut, not Roger Corman, a little Roger Corman. And so my mantra back then was, I'm tired of seeing movies about movies people have seen. I want to see movies about a life someone has led. And, but given that people are in a hurry and can't actually find time to have a life, the most important advice that I can give is don't be afraid of doing what you think is right, irrespective of how wrong everyone says you are. Just forget that. Because look, you're either going to be a human typewriter or you're going to be a writer. And if you're a writer, you got to have a point of view. You got to have, you got to have a reason to write besides just the paycheck.
Yeah.
And, so you got to find your voice and you got to trust it.
And it's spot on what you said, David, because I have been a full-time documentary filmmaker for the last 6-7 years, and I have always struggled with finding, in the beginning it was like, let's just make a film because you just want to make movies. Who cares about what the story might be, if it's powerful or not? But after my first film, it was pretty decent. It wasn't anything groundbreaking. I realized that, I need to be, like you said, you need to be bold. You need not to be afraid. And that does pay dividends from a personal standpoint and, as a career standpoint. So that you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. No, this is great, David. Thank you so much. Anything else you want to add or anything?
No, not really. I think that, look, let's put it this way, just a little bit like, if you look at the landscape of streaming right now, it's you'd be hard pressed to find something original. That's my opinion.
Yeah.
I mean, but you're also going to be hard pressed to find somebody who wants to do something original. Now, it can be done, and that's what I'm focusing on right now. Is like, okay, I'm going to give into the whole streaming world. I'm going to find. I've got a show. We're negotiating a show. I've got another one I'm going out with. We have lots of attachments. I've decided, look, let's just give in to the format, but not give in to your personal point of view.
Yeah. So, well said. Well, thank you, David. I appreciate your time.
I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thank you so much for watching and listening. Don't forget to subscribe, like, share, and comment, and do come back for another episode. Until then, have a great day.